Hello, it's Trent Clark, and welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, CEO of Leadershipity Serial, our CEO of AIM NIL Academy. I am a longtime global speaker, and most people know me because I spent 13 years coaching professional baseball, coaching in 3 World Series. And today I've got my special guest, Sarah Kate Harkness. Sharky, how are you?
I'm good, Trent. How are you?
I'm great. Sharky is in Sydney today. So, while I enjoy my nice little late afternoon recording time with Sharky, mid-afternoon, Sharky's lurking on like AM, crack of darkness here. Get you up in the morning. Like, sorry about this.
Let's go.
Yeah. Sharky, tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm mama_Sharky on Instagram, and I'm on projectlotus.info.
Love that. And so let's get to know Sarah a little bit. Here on the Winners Find a Way show, we always bring the 1%. Sarah is no different, has been through an absolute ringer of, and I love this on your LinkedIn profile, survivor, but you are a woman in tech. That's survivor enough, by the way, right there. Minus all the other things you've been through. And there's a lot going on. You been a executive and owner in 2 different firms now, with your first one with what is that, Cattle Dog Digital, right?
Mm-hmm.
And built that business up, and then moved over to Project Lotus, where you head up as the CEO now. Longtime coach, empowering a lot of people through challenges, which is absolutely awesome. And listen, when you talk about someone who's actually empowering someone through challenges, you should probably talk to someone who's been through some challenges. And so the good news is Sarah's your girl. All right. Sharky's been there, done it. So it's pretty awesome. You have 3 kids, and you're working on your book, Guided by Giants, which is out soon. You're going to finish that up, which is super exciting. You're a University of Sydney grad and an Adelaide kid. You're a Southern Australian.
Yeah, South Oz.
Yeah.
Right at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The South Oz. Like, is that warmer down there, or is that actually further away from the equator?
No, it's warmer and it's dry. It's dry and it's warm and it's tiny. I love Adelaide and bless all of Adelaide, but it is tiny. It's like a little small country town. Everyone knows everyone.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
Well, I've got the Sydney Opera House on my bucket list, so I'm gonna have to get over to the Australian Open.
Yeah.
Go see a show at the Opera House. I think, if I could just do that, I feel like I would have.
You have. Come hang out with Sharky.
Yeah, believe it. I will do that for sure. So what most people don't know about Sharky is that you've been through the ringer through a lot of health scares, issues, challenges. And I actually share what most people don't know about you, which we've been through this lucid coma experience. And mine was very short term, and Sarah's was a little longer and more impactful. And after surviving 3 strokes, 26 plus surgeries on different things, but related to this directly, it's just been a wild ride of 4 years. Meanwhile, having a 7, 5, and 3-year-old.
Yeah. They say mums are superheroes. I kind of felt a little bit like one after all that madness.
So when you left the hospital, they gave you a cape and they said, "Hey, listen, you qualify now."
No, like, we don't know what to do with you. Please leave. You're here too often. You're a frequent flyer. Go now. Yeah.
That is, I think there should be some sort of cape involved there for sure. Some sort of really cool superhero outfit. I always loved Elastic Girl, but whatever you want.
Start rocking it everywhere.
You know what? I think we should write this up. We should call you Abundance Girl. Abundance 360. You would be like the Abundance Girl, and you're going to be a superhero, just bringing abundance to all.
It's totally on brand. That's exactly what I'm doing, and that's exactly what I've turned it all into. And there's no other way to be, frankly, because otherwise you just stay in the misery. So it probably started as like a slight I don't want to be here in this moment. This moment sucks, for all of the moments that were post-surgery or dealing with, and I'll correct you, it was only 1 stroke, thankfully, but I did have 3 brain surgeries. So I think the brain has had a battering, but thankfully I was not so not so permanently damaged by that process that I'm, I can walk and talk, and it was in the basal ganglia, so right at the front, motor function and language. So yeah.
It's a crazy ride. Let's take it back. We're going to talk a little bit about winners find a way. So I love the quote on the 4 disciplines of execution. Winners, when shown data they are losing, find a way to win. You're a young, beautiful woman, decide, hey, women in tech is where I want to be, right? You're a 10 plus year at Salesforce. I mean, which is just a fabulous US brand that people know very well, and obviously global brand. And I mean, do you think, are you this kid in Adelaide going, yeah, I think I'm going to be a tech guru here and a genius, and this is where I really want to spend my job working with like 98 to 99% men, and like and be the few of the few. Like, this is a pretty easy way to pick out a guy, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Or not.
Or avoid a guy.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I actually was a drama buff. Like I swept the floors. I was a producer and a stage manager and an actor. And my first company before I got into tech was a stage and screen company. So I did my first show. I directed my first show at 21. My cast was entirely cast from my not even a 1 bedroom. It was a studio apartment. I sat there and, had everyone come and audition. And then I got a grant for 30 grand and I found the best theatre, because I figured if I had the best theatre in Melbourne at the time, because I'd moved from Adelaide to Melbourne, then I would maybe make it. And anyway, the play got made into a film, and that was, I'm going to call it a raging success, because I learned a lot. I got the worst reviews ever. But at 21, that was kind of good to get some skins. So when I moved into tech, I was already primed, ready for, I guess, some adversity in that, it's entirely male dominated. I was in sales in tech. So in software as a service, I started my career in the same year as the GFC in 2008. Like, it really was a comedy of errors. And or serendipity. And I remember the decision was, do I go and be a producer of a TV show? It was like a Christian TV show, I don't know, making like Sunday sessions or something, and then, or go and work for Salesforce. And I chose Salesforce because I had seen the interface and thought it was like Facebook for business. And I just fell in love with this idea that you could customize something, curate it to serve a customer. And I really fell in love with that idea. And that's why, I gave 10 years of my life to Salesforce. I still adore them, and the Ohana, very much an active alumni. So, yeah.
So let's break that down a little bit. I mean, do you ever look back on that, as many of us do in our decisions? We make a bunch of choices in this life, right? And, from 2 different job offers to all these things, did you look back and think, what would my life been different had I gone to produce the Christian show on Sunday, and not dealt with, because the women in tech, I don't think are likely the problem in tech. I think the men in tech are probably likely more of the problem.
No comment, but also all the comments. Like, look, I've done podcasts and blog posts about this, and I'm actually a huge advocate and raging feminist. No, I'm kidding. But really, I think women have fought hard and long in many industries, but particularly in tech. It is still a highly male-dominated area. We don't get a lot of women in STEM. We don't get a lot of women in research in STEM. So we don't actually even get many women programmers. That's changing, thankfully, thanks to companies like GitLab. I worked for them pre-IPO for a bit, and having cultures within our organizations that are a lot more accepting and a lot more about equality. Salesforce was a really good place to, I started a group at the time called FemForce. I'm really not painting a great picture here. I'm going to turn into this.
I think I saw that movie, actually. I think it's a great movie title,
It's a great movie title. And we've had some incredible women and men advocates and supporters of women generally. Matt Cameron, who's a really good friend of mine, also an author and a coach, but he ran Salesforce out here in APAC at the time, and his methodology was about it was servant leadership. It was about allowing people to thrive by giving them their best work or putting them in positions to do their best work. And it wouldn't matter who you were or what your background was. It was actually about creating space for success and allowing somebody the autonomy to find that success as well. They're also potentially going to find failure, but success is the kind of key. And Salesforce was a great learning ground for and time for that. There were other companies that I worked for, and there were people in that industry not so good. And I think it's the decisions of a small few that ultimately affect the whole. And you end up with women who don't put their hand up for that next role because of it, or they drop out completely. I have very close friends who now haven't gone back to work because they're like, after they had kids, because they're like, why would I keep continuing to put myself in this position of adversity on purpose? So we've got to do a better job for not just our women, but particularly in this industry. Like, women have contributed so much to STEM and space, and this industry needs a lot more women, I think.
Is it, do you think, like, obviously you've been with some big US companies right there, US based companies, right?
Yes.
You mentioned APAC, which is the Asia Pacific area.
Yes.
Culturally, by the way, not typically women first, always on the, Asia Pac, right? And so is working in that environment add another layer and challenge to you're already limited in women in tech, which we know is a low percentage, right?
Yeah.
And now these are very influential, fast moving companies that have massive reach, and expectations are high. And now you've got a culture that doesn't always see that the same as the value. Did you fight that at all?
Totally fought that, and tried to be the example. It's part of why I went off and ended up starting my own company, because I got so fed up trying to fight a system that was set up to fail. Again, I was really lucky and really blessed to have experiences like GitLab, experiences like Salesforce, and even Dropbox to some degree. But there were other companies that I worked for along the way that were I'm not going to say too much bad stuff about, but like, I worked for Marketo, and that was a really, really challenging time. We were already faced with being a new product in a new market with a new concept. So marketing automation, people didn't know what that was. And then to add into that dynamics within an environment, you end up with a really challenging moment. And eventually, I actually ended up leaving Sydney for a time. I didn't want to work in tech anymore. Like, you end up making life decisions because of it.
Yeah, and Marketo was pre-IPO at that time, which for people that don't know in tech, goes IPO. One of the values for labor management when IPOs go is there's a lot of governance behind labor management after you IPO. Pre-IPO, we're a bunch of gunslingers trying to figure it out, right?
Cowboy. It's serious cowboy.
Yeah, you're kind of cowboys, right? Like, and so you're like, man, we're all just cowboying up, cowgirl up, and let's do this thing. And everyone's like, is this gonna work? I don't know. Let's just throw shit against the wall, And it's a little crazy, and probably more, that loose environment creates probably opportunity for bad actors. Is that fair?
Totally. And I think that the one thing that I've kind of learned in almost 20 years. So we're talking almost 20 years now in this industry.
That's not bad.
Not bad. I've survived it. It's you can be that. You get to be that. So leading by example is a huge, particularly when you're in a position of power. In fact, your responsibility, if you're in a position of power, solely lies on whether or not you're a good example of what the rest of the company should look like. I feel like if that's not your number one item in your job description, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, you know, when we put up, we have the pyramid of leadershipity, kind of based on John Wooden's. You know, I use the style of John Wooden's pyramid of success, which was written like 50s, 60s, and 70s, and I just love the concept of it. And you know, those cornerstones of the two triangle is integrity and humility. Like we have to foundationally get those right as leaders, and if you don't have those, like, please go somewhere else. Like, please don't lead, because there's a bunch of problems when you don't have any integrity and you don't have any humility. Like, we're just stirring in recipe for disaster, right? And it's just like, this isn't going to end well. There are consequences to putting people in highly responsible, the responsibility areas and productivity areas. And then all of a sudden they're missing these two key idiots, because you are building a foundation on sand, and it's not going to hold.
No. And I think that doesn't just impact somebody directly, right? That will then impact your customers. That'll then impact their customers. You get this flow downstream, at least in a business sense. That whole downstream effect is that insidiousness of a lack of integrity, that you're really ultimately, that it's just a lack of accountability and integrity, ends up being missed, and that does flow into everything. So I'm on a mission to eradicate that completely.
Eradicate. I love that word. Good word.
Yeah.
Now, and let's pivot to the next point here of, you know, we always talk about, you hear the stats, like, you are who you surround yourself with, the 5 people. Well, the people with a lack of integrity, guess what, aren't looking for integrity in their people around them, right? Like, they are not often concerned, like, oh, this is a high moral standard I'm requiring to have, because I don't want anyone looking at my moral standard too much, so I don't look at anybody else's too much, because that way, you know, I can kind of leverage it off to somebody else if it's a problem. In fact, having people with a little lack of integrity around me actually gives me a bit of a scapegoat when things get tough. Like, well, you know, I mean, you know, I'm not as bad as Charles over here. I mean, Diana, you know, you've seen what she's done, you know, and how she's handled her expense reports. And it's like, wait, you knew that they were cheating and you never say anything, but now it's convenient to offload your trash behavior. And this is the opportunity. And I've seen that time and time again.
And I think, again, that kind of comes back to, what is that? That's a demonstration of a lack of integrity or accountability. And accountability, like, you don't have to have a high moral compass or you know, be holding yourself to such high regard that you don't allow for mistakes. That's fine. I actually think failure, and I'm friends with that. Failure allows us to learn, and so that's how I've always learned my life. I just try something, and if it doesn't work out, I learn from that. It's a data point, so it's pure data collection all the time.
Yeah.
But for others that perhaps aren't wired that way, one of the what you're going to get out what you put in, right? So if you're only putting that out into the world, and you're only putting that out into your accountability, then obviously when that expense report doesn't get approved or something happens, something will happen to remind you, hang on a sec, you've got to stop and take notice of this. And that'll keep playing out until you understand that that is a pattern, and the pattern is entirely up to you.
Yeah.
How that then plays.
Yeah, I love the grit formula. I don't know if you're familiar with the grit formula, but I love the, hey, talent times effort equals skill, right? And so, hey, I've got this talent, and I've seen a lot of 10 talents with 3 effort. And so it's like, whoa, 10 times 3, 30. And then that brings my skill. Okay, skill times effort again. Effort counts twice. 30 times 3 is 90. So my achievement level on a scale of 0 or 1 to 1,000 is 90.
Yeah.
And this is one of the most talented people you've ever seen in technology, in music, in language, in name it, you know, fill in the blank, right? Athletics, right? Easy to do. So I tell people, like, get very real about that formula with your team members, because if there is a lack of effort, there's probably a lack of integrity, right? Because we're hired to contribute. And if you don't do your job, I consider that a lack of integrity. Like, hey, I signed on to do these 10 things. I'm doing 3 of them.
Yeah.
Like, but you're taking all the salary, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I tell folks, like, if you have anyone that ever is a sub 200, A, never hire them for goodness sakes. And if they're in your organization, get them out as fast as you can. They are wreaking havoc on your
Mhm.
people.
Yeah. I think they're energy, time, and resource suckers. So
Yeah.
it ends up being this vampire situation. You carry them and carry them and carry them, but and maybe that's because you see potential in them, or you know, you really do believe that there's that capacity for change. But
Yeah.
ultimately, you can't force anybody to do anything ever. It has to come from them, and it's, you know, why we have free will. So I feel like there's a in our organizations, if you know, you as a servant leader, you can't run a dictatorship. So if you're allowing that person to stay, then that's a reflection on you too.
Yeah.
I
For
reckon your
sure.
points come down, or your capacity for executive function and leadership comes down because of it too.
Well, and I think that's why, surrounding yourself with like a 600,
Mm.
600 or higher, you've got a bunch of people who either have a lot of talent or a lot of effort. And, I always use that formula on like famous athletes like a Tom Brady in our football here, where
Mm.
Brady starts out, he's a 6 talent, right? But he's a 10 effort person.
Yeah.
So he's a 60 times 10 is 600. And you're like, whoa, that's crazy. But each effort, every rep counts. And so you see the talent go to 7 and then to 8. And
Yeah.
so the other way doesn't work. And I think this is where we get lost, is because we see that 3 effort and like, oh, wow, if I could just get her to work a little harder. She's so talented. Like, there's so much potential. We're going to wait on her. Like, you're like, hey man, like, she's still coming in at 10:30. Everyone's been working for 2 hours, like,
Yeah.
and the same project, and everyone's doing half her job and holding her in contempt because the effort's not there. And so it's such a struggle. So when you talk about as a leader, how important it is that we surround ourselves with like-minded, accountable people that hold the standard.
I think it's critical. I think it's without question then the most important ingredient. And I've made a point, particularly in the last, I'd say, 12 months, as I've gotten healthier, as I've become more disciplined, as I've really elevated myself in the ways that I had been fighting for, coming out of so much adversity.
Yes.
Um, and so knowing, also adding an ingredient in there of knowledge and understanding, and the data point of you can die at any time and we're all on this planet for a reason. And, adding all of these bits together kind of means that the people that get my time and the people that I surround myself with are so highly curated. I'd rather spend time alone if it means that if it means that I'd have to track or kind of trade my energy for a vampire
Yeah.
or with a vampire, because it's just not. It's so critical to me. It's my life force. It's the difference between whether or not I have pain or not chronic pain, or it really is kind of the difference sometimes between whether that's a good or a bad day or an abundant outcome, or it's so critical. So those people are incredibly important, and you can have 5, you can have 10, but I choose to keep them really small. Like
Yeah.
it's count on one hand who
It's very
you.
interesting how, you talked about withdrawal, because I think this is a good, first of all, none of us think we're that person, by the way, ever, right? Like, well,
Yeah.
I'm doing my thing. Like, I'm sure I'm not weighing the organization down, right?
Yeah.
But I tell a lot of folks, when you're around world beaters, when you're around people of high integrity and high standard, and they're getting things done, and when you see people pulling back and they stop talking to you, like, the end is near. They
Mm-hmm.
don't believe like you're worthy of their time and effort, and it's like a spigot that turns off. They just turn the handle, and like, I just can't give them any more of my energy, any more of my time, any more of my effort. They're just not going to simply get it, and so it's off. And
Yeah.
it's like, whoa, hey, I used to spend a lot of time with my regional manager. He used to take me out to lunches and stuff, but now he never calls. Now he never does anything. He never talks to me anymore. I'm like, like, how's that going? Like, I'm like, how's your resume? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
time to brush up on it because this is getting close. And so
Yeah.
let's pivot a little bit to, you've been involved with the Abundant 360 program, Peter
Mhm.
Diamandis. I mean, and you have your own abundance theory. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's just an equation, and I came up with it to help explain this understanding that I'd learned, which was that if I actively curated and chose to seek abundance and seek an abundance outcome, I would get that. So it kind of started with just, being alone in a hospital during a pandemic. It was like just me and God, and I'm like, okay, well, I watched this pattern play out. But then I needed a way to explain it to people, and particularly at the time, it was, how do I explain this to my ex-husband, who's not got strong historical empathy and is neurodivergent? Like, he's very wired cerebrally, like he's very wired in the brain. So how do I explain it? So I sat and kind of worked out that if you can curate and be aware of your energy, as well as your connection with that person, the time, and then raise your frequency, they will match it or they won't. But if they do, you get an exponential. So it really creates an exponential abundant outcome. So if you're both kind of at that frequency of, giving, let's say they're like freely giving or providing, advice or whatever it is, but you're both freely giving to each other, it creates this vortex of an exponential increase in what you can create together.
Wow. So energy, time, what's the C stand for?
So it's A equals E, so energy times time, times connection, times frequency.
Nice.
And you get abundance.
Wow. That's awesome.
I was like, and that explains it to him. And guess what? Because he's so wired for maths and science, that he got it. And it helped him in a number of ways.
That's so cool. So coming back to this, I want to finish with the mindset, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, I think that, you and I share this thing of this lucid event in our lives. Mine was post-surgical, where I fell into this time where I would wake up. Only happened to me twice, out of a deep sleep, and I would be fully aware cognitively of everything that was going on. I could not open my eyes. I could hear. My brain was fully active, and I could not move, like paralyzed, right? And I mean, paralyzed to the fact, like, swallowing, right? Like, it was crazy. Mm-hmm. And you've been through something like this too. And you've been through all these challenges and these surgeries, it's significant along the way. And the body's rehabilitating, the body is reproducing, but you're also rehabilitating your mindset and building that back up. Talk us through, because everyone's going through a challenge, and big or small. Like, I don't know if the body knows anything. It's a distress, right? And it's a distressful signal that's coming in. It's not eustress. We're not elated by it, right? We're like, oh crap, this is bad, right? Like, the body starts reacting. And one of the things that you and I talked a little bit offline is like, why don't we train anybody for this distress when it's going to happen? Because we're all going to get distress at some point, right? And if I go to my tool belt, like, oh, I just went to the distress, like, and I look for the tool belt, and I'm like, I don't have any tools in my belt. Like, if I'm standing there in front of the doorway and I got to fix it, I got to, drop some, drywall and sheet and hammer. I've got hammers. I've got, tape. I've got all this stuff. I got tools. Right. And now here we have these people in this distressful situation and no tools.
No tools. I think the body and the mind, my caveat to this answer is that the body and the mind actually are incredible works of art. And often in those times, you will find something automatic, beautifully automatic happens anyway. So if you just surrender in that moment and have some self-compassion, you will allow for that process to happen quicker. But if you don't, then there are tools and there are ways you can train your mind and your body to some degree for adversity or adverse situations. Look at Navy SEALs, look at Goggins, like all these guys are out there. They are actively training the mind for when adversity and suffering comes. And that's one way to do it. I just happen to have learned how to do it through facing it without much choice. The thing that I realized, and I guess the one tool that you can use, is recognizing the choice. Recognizing the choice you have in the moment and allowing a little bit of space, whether it's a breath, whether it's just putting some music in your ears, whether it's going and talking to somebody that you know that you trust about that situation, whatever it is that is going to help just give a little bit of space to that moment so that you can alchemize and make a decision. And when we're faced with things like going into a coma, you don't get a whole lot of space to do that, right? Like it just happens and you're like, oh my God. But I don't know. And we were talking about this, like the same kind of thing ended up happening where at one point, yes, it was terrifying. Yes, it was scary. And yes, you feel helpless in those moments. Suffering makes you feel helpless.
Yeah.
We all feel like that, no matter what the suffering is. Like, honestly, that is universal. The thing that's perhaps the difference for whether or not that outcome remains and keeps you in suffering or perpetuates the suffering or makes things worse in your life, or whether or not you use it for better and create it abundantly as a better outcome and a positive, is simply a decision and how you look at it. And in my case, I chose to look at all of those surgeries and all of those moments and all of that pain and all of that suffering and just go, okay, there has to be a reason for this, because I don't know many humans that have been through this and come out the other side. I'm grateful for the miracle, but why? And so I'd look for the why, or like, okay, what does this mean? What could this be representative of? I just started looking for more meaning and making decisions based from there rather than just this is happening to me, because nothing ever happens to us anyway. Like there's a lot more behind this when we get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just had this conversation earlier this morning about with a good friend who we were like, I'm not asking why anymore. I'm asking what. What do you want me to learn from this? What am I supposed to see? You know, the why almost feels victim-y to me, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm like, well, why did this happen to me? Like, well, why? Why am I not, good enough? And and I feel like it just feels too negative almost to me. And I don't want to discount that, I'm not saying don't be curious, because why is a great curious question, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to discount we should drop our curiosity, but I do think what's a better question than why sometimes.
Totally.
And I think one of the things that you and the SEALs kind of have in common is, they're going to the island and they're getting trained and everything else. But, it's a choice that they make to be there. And then they make it very uncomfortable. So they get so much confidence being in distress because they do it again and again, and they have a pretty positive outcome. Like typically no one dies, right? And so they come back out of that training and it's a big deal. And this is why I think people should be coming to you, Sharky, a coach, because they're in a situation that they may have gone through distress. And I want someone to have the confidence who's been through the distress, who's been through the challenge, and understands the what that I'm expecting, because it's not going to be forever, right?
No, and it never, ever is. It
never.
And it gets shorter and shorter and shorter the more you start to become conscious of this. If you just look for how this plays out, suffering is a teacher. It has so much value, and I've started to develop skills in both camps. So in the abundance camp, but also like, okay, what did I actually do in that moment with that surgery or that recovery or learning to walk? Like, what were the actual things that I did, and listing them out as steps that other people can take, because anyone can draw. You can literally draw on that for anything. And so even applying that in my own life and going back and reading my own book and writing the book has been really helpful to remind me because it is like suffering all over again. I don't, with your 2 books, I don't know if you feel like that, but it is anything you are bringing into the world, you literally are having to birth it again. And so I'm going through every surgery, every brain surgery, moment, waking up in intensive care, every single little data point, and it's brutal. It is really torturous.
Yeah, I actually don't recommend that to people. It's awesome.
No, it's
doing
hard.
this, and we're going to all benefit from it because of your experience. But I often use the term, "Hey, it's great to review it. It's not great to relive it."
No,
so I want to review it, but I don't want to relive it. So I want to take and extract and sponge out the message, but like I don't want to put myself back in abuse, back in where I was at years and years ago. And so it's a hard thing to separate that line, though, right?
Oh, completely. And I found it helpful to have things like music where I can bring that out and then just leave it there. It's quite cathartic, actually.
You've absolutely alchemized this distress and understanding what you've gone through and the what. And why don't you talk to us a little bit as you strip this down to will and determination for people out there that are going through some hard things? What does will and determination look like? And what would you ask of them to really grasp that?
Everybody has a will within them and we're born with it. I don't think I think that over time things chip away at that will. And that will, particularly for mothers, particularly for fathers, particularly for those of us that have reasons. But even if we don't have reasons to have a strong will, we should find it. And the reason why is because everybody needs to understand that they're worth it. Everyone. There is not a person, not a human being on this planet that is not worth it. No matter what they've done, no matter how bad things have got, no matter what they've inflicted, what wounds they've created, what bad things they've put out into the world, everyone's still worth it.
Yeah.
Without question.
Can be forgiven.
Completely. And I'm not suggesting condoning bad behavior or breaking the law in any way. But I do think that programs that help rehabilitate people or bring people back to self-compassion often hurt people. So we need to stop that cycle. We have to. But the will has to come from within. It can't come from anywhere else. And the will that I noticed within me was so strong. Every single time I had a surgery, it got stronger and stronger, almost pathological. It became this like, all right, I'm gonna fuel myself from this moment. And the worse it was, the more I fueled. So I would get fuel and energy from those situations, but that is not a positive thing. I would not wish anybody to have to do that. It's just that is how I survived it because it was so bad. There was no other option. And the will would have just left me. So I just maintained leaning into fostering and honing and encouraging that will and getting that stronger and stronger and stronger. Determination was the other component. So determination, you mentioned it, right? Like that's just using the will effectively in a positive way that then provides an abundant outcome. So for me, determination is reaching a goal, and so setting a goal, reaching it, and then giving yourself the reward, the dopamine, and being your own generator of these things instead of externalizing it so much. Yeah.
Love it. Hey, Sarah, Kate, Harkness, Sharky, tell them where they can find you before we go.
Come and find me. I'm mama_Sharky on Instagram. That's the easiest way to find me, or Sharky CEO on LinkedIn. And you can find me at projectlotus.info or abundancewithsharky.com.
That's awesome. That's so great. So thank you. For everybody else, Winners Find a Way show every Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific. Come and join us. Hear the best of these one percenters like my good friend Sarah, Kate, Harkness. You are awesome. And until next time, everybody, we'll see you then.